What is up, wrestling fans, and welcome to the final edition for 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey. It's been a wild journey back in time to the year where wrestling changed forever, where WWE consumed every other promotion and led a monopoly which lasted all the way until, well, this year, quite frankly. And joining me on this journey back in time, me, of course, being Callum Wiggins, introducing myself for the rare time in these journeys. But joining me, as always, is Robert D. Felice.
Oh, well, we have cranked the DeLorean to 88 miles per hour for the final time. Callum, this is the end of our journey. How do you feel?
It's difficult living 2 years at once. It's it's kind of like 2019 has already been a hectic and difficult and challenging year as it is. Really, having to live 2001 alongside that as well. It might
Very,
it takes some getting used to.
very historic years, very drastically different, but also similar in the way certain things shaped out.
I'm pretty sure sometime in the, I don't know, 18, 20 years in the future, someone will be doing a review of 2019,
Oh, yeah.
trying to living through all that stuff again when AEW is long dead and like WWE's performing shows on WrestleMania and on the moon or whatever.
Yep.
Well, until then, we'll keep plugging away with all the news because this is our first post-Christmas recording for Smack Talk. It might not be the first thing you hear after Christmas, but either way, hope you had a very happy holiday season. And there's going to be a lot more content coming up towards you between even before the new year, but definitely when 2020 starts. But that's what looking forward. Now we're going to start looking backwards to December 2001, final month of the year. It's not the most newsworthy of the entire year, so I don't think that we'll be going into too much detail in the reheated tags, but we're talking about Vengeance 2001 as well, which will be our big pay-per-view review. But let's start, as we always do, with just the news and events that were taking place in that time. So I think the biggest overarching story that was present in the Wrestling Observer newsletters that I was reading in the build-up to this was that WWE was planning a brand split, funnily enough. 2002 did see the Raw and SmackDown brands be split apart, with Ric Flair taking the Raw side and Vince McMahon taking the SmackDown side. But even though the rumours were surrounding the fact that they were going to be doing a brand split, what wasn't clear was when they were going to do it. With most people actually expecting that it would take place essentially the first week of 2002. That didn't prove
I'm
to be the
glad they
case.
didn't, you know? It wouldn't have
Uh,
made a lot of sense.
no, not particularly, except for the fact that obviously there were just two owners of the company, so they were assuming to do it at some point, and they had a lot more talent than they previously had with the WCW guys coming in. So it was something that ended up having to happen, like being pretty much an inevitability. But they decided to wait until the week after WrestleMania to do it. I believe that was when they did it. It was
Yeah,
somewhere
that
around that
sounds
time.
about right.
I don't know if it was exactly the week afterwards, but it was definitely around that time.
I
It, wa-
guess we know that the biggest story coming out coming out of this month will be the unification of the championships. Did you ever feel like that could have been done differently, or do you like the way they did it?
in terms of the unification of the championships, I think if you have two world champions, you have to. Well, the simplest way to do it is to just have the two world champions fight each other, and then the winner unifies the belts. But they didn't want. They wanted to essentially present someone outside of The Rock and Austin and give them a boost. So the way they did it, I guess, makes the most sense. I mean, it's the two most recent WWF champions against the two most recent WCW champions, so they were the right four to compete for the titles. But yeah, there could have been a simpler way of doing it.
I agree.
I mean, the most simple way would have been to have Jericho hold the title going into Survivor Series or whatever. And if you were so desperate on Jericho winning the title,
I
but
think what could have been done would have been unifying them at Survivor Series. It would have made that show feel more special, you know?
oh yeah, it definitely would have made it a bigger deal. But I guess they were so set with the 5-on-5 tag team match, and that wouldn't have been a special without The Rock and Austin on either side.
Right.
So, so that's like the big overarching news at the time. There's going to be a brand split coming, but it doesn't come as soon as many were expecting it to. Main other stuff from essentially what was happening on TV at the time. So we've spoken about how towards the back end of November, post Survivor Series, Vince McMahon had introduced the Kiss My Ass Club. And essentially, he goes crazy with it this month. It results in Jim Ross being forced to kiss his ass, which is probably the biggest storyline development happening in December, which is the Undertaker heel turn. So,
yeah, and I believe we touched on that in the November episode, but that was a very strong heel turn.
Yeah, essentially it was built around the idea of Undertaker saying that everybody who'd been through the WWF and worked with Vince McMahon had at one point or another kissed his ass, and because he'd been there the longest, then nobody had kissed his ass more than he had. And so he used that as an excuse to, well, if Jim Ross is not going to kiss his ass, that means that he must be better than The Undertaker. And went on a quest in search of respect and beating out of anybody that would stand in his way.
Now, ironically, we have come on this show for almost the entire year and lambasted the American Badass Undertaker. But this is where the character actually turns the corner and becomes one of the better things on TV.
Well, fundamentally, it's no surprise that as soon as a WWF superstar turns heel, they almost definitely become much more likable, or not much likable, but a lot more entertaining to watch. I think our issues with The Undertaker built around the fact that he was Mr. WWF, or he believed himself to be Mr. WWF against WCW, and so would throw his considerable weight around in order to bury every person that he was facing. Now that now WCW is gone and now he's heel and he's got a new character and a new lease of life, then he starts to get entertaining again.
Yeah, what did you think about the haircut?
I think it worked for the character, just as a clear disconnect from basically anything that was resembling the old Undertaker.
Yeah, this is around the time where I started to really miss the Dead Man because he was still the Undertaker, but he looked and felt nothing like the Undertaker I knew.
I presume his hair was probably thinning by this point as well.
Probably.
So I imagine that was part of the reasoning behind it. I think it kind of worked, the short hair and the goatee.
And I imagine it was just so much easier to manage, and he doesn't strike me as somebody who wants to take the time to manage long hair.
No, that's probably why he ended up cutting it towards that in the build-up to the second match with Triple H. That was like the big news story. So Vince McMahon continues to try and do the Kiss My Ass Club. He tries to get Stone Cold to kiss his ass at one point, but Stone Cold doesn't do that because obviously. And then the week afterwards, he tries to get Trish Stratus to kiss his ass after the as a comeback many months down the line after WrestleMania 17. But The Rock breaks that up, and so they have a match on Raw. Vince McMahon and Kurt Angle against The Rock and Trish Stratus. The Rock and Trish Stratus win, and so Vince is forced to, what he believes to be on an episode of SmackDown, to kiss The Rock's ass. I'm saying kiss ass a lot in this podcast.
How do you feel?
I feel dirty. I don't feel good about this at all. But Rock eventually says that he's not good enough to kiss his ass, so he brings out first Jim Ross, but it's not Jim Ross. Then he brings out Trish Stratus, but it's not Trish Stratus either.
Shout out to Vince, who does a wonderful, excitedly crawling on his knees towards Trish's ass, thinking that it will be.
No, but instead it is the returning Rikishi back from injury and back as a babyface after they decide to just completely forget his heel turn ever happened.
That doesn't sound like WWE at all.
No, or at least they recognised the mistake and decided to rectify it or retcon it essentially afterwards. But it's amazing. Like now in December, Austin is a babyface, The Rock's babyface, and Rikishi's back as a babyface. So it's like the early months of 2001 or late 2000 never happened.
Yep, and that's what I don't like. I don't like that, and I've said it the entire way through this journey. That by the time we were gonna hit 2002, almost nothing that we were going through mattered.
So what happens is, as you could probably guess, is Rikishi gets his ass out, Rock shoves Vince McMahon's face into it, big moment, crowd goes crazy, and then and then that's the kind of the build. I think that was the go home angle leading into Vengeance. Like just the idea of Vince McMahon getting humiliated and the fact that he wasn't happy about having to share power with Ric Flair, who is now fully established as a co-owner of WWE.
Was it weird to you that, and I guess like we won't get a chance to touch on this, but real quick, is it weird to you that they continuously gave Vince McMahon control of the SmackDown brand? It seems like with SmackDown, they always wanted it to be the bigger deal, but everything just goes back to Raw always.
I think part of it was due to the fact that, at least from what I've gathered from the research into 2001, is that the initial idea was to give WCW Raw, or give Raw to WCW and have that be the Monday night show and have WWF be on SmackDown.
See, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it always seems like WWE wants to be rid of Raw, or at least wants to establish SmackDown as their true top franchise, but it almost never, ever works.
I think there's just I think it's quite more likely that there are different factions within the company. Some of them prefer Raw, some of them want to champion SmackDown, that type of thing. And they always end up reverting back to type of giving things to Raw because Raw is like the firmly established 25 plus year, nearly 30-year show. So they'll always revert back to type, but every now and again they'll try and push SmackDown as the bigger deal. I think it just depends on who's pushing for whichever show at that time.
Which is fair.
Another like big television moment that happens in December of 2001 is the famous Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Booker T Supermarket Brawl.
This is fun. This is just fun.
I've loved because I went back and listened to some interviews that Booker T and Stone Cold gave on this event, and apparently it was pretty much 95% done off the cuff.
Yeah.
Not like they knew that it was going to finish with like the checkout and price check on a jackass for Booker T, and a few look like the starting points, like Austin coming through with the milk towards the end, like just coming out of a freezer with the milk in hand. But the rest of it, they just messed around with a load of food items off the shelves, and Austin gave some good one-liners.
I think I remember him hitting him with a sausage and singing "When the Moon Hits Your Eyes Like a Big Pizza Pie." That's amore. Like, this is peak Austin transitioning into a friendlier comedic character while still being the guy who will flip you off and, give you the stunner.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think this is also the slow beginnings of Booker T becoming a top name in WWE as well. Because after coming into WWF as the WCW champion, presented as like the biggest deal out of WCW because they couldn't sign any of the like more established top names, he really quickly fell by the wayside and just became an afterthought to Stone Cold Steve Austin leading the alliance. Now this is the start of Booker T becoming just, you're now part of the roster, you're Booker T, you've got to make a name for yourself here instead. I think this was a good start.
And I think him being paired with Vince is a sign of like, okay, Vince likes you. I'm willing to bet that the loyalty he showed WCW and the willingness to let go of the contract to join the WWF, it does pay off.
I think partially it does. I still feel like he kind of just not so much bottomed out, but he had to. They were just going to slowly build him back up, and I feel like considering the huge financial hit he took to join WWF early, this was not exactly the recompense that he kind of deserved for that.
That's fair.
To have to start not so much from the bottom because he's feuding with Stone Cold Steve Austin, so it's not like you're starting from the bottom, but to kind of just fall straight back into the mid card really. And then because after this he's pretty much in the wilderness for a little while, then he's feuding with Edge over a shampoo commercial at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
And then he's part of the NWO, but he's immediately kicked out, and then he's teaming with Goldust. So
but when he does have his moments, and I think the reason he's still firmly planted within their family today is because he made the decision to forgo the money and make the jump.
Oh yeah, I still feel that's something that they've always been grateful to him for, but it just probably took him a lot longer to get back to the top of the company than he probably would have hoped for. But that was a big thing. A lot of people actually forget about how that feud actually continued, because Booker T defeated Stone Cold Steve Austin in a First Blood match on the Raw following that supermarket brawl, due to interference from the returning Big Boss Man, who we haven't seen throughout the entirety of 2001. Yep.
Everything you just said about that sentence doesn't feel right.
No, something that people mostly completely forget about, because this feud between Booker T and Stone Cold pretty much just went by the wayside. Pretty soon
Does that mean
afterwards.
that they wanted Boss Man to do something with Austin? Like, for the top star in the company that he has a really weird fizzle out period, Austin.
Yeah. I think it was the idea of unifying Booker T and Boss Man as part of a weird tag team where Boss Man was kind of his security or like backup, and Booker T was be the star. Because then they ended up having a handicap match the following week, which Booker T and Boss Man also defeated Austin in. So Austin was losing quite a lot.
That's so wild to me. Like, I would have never remembered that in a million years.
No, it's just something that just goes by the memory, because I think really the end of the Austin Booker T feud was Austin eliminating Booker T in a matter of seconds in the Royal Rumble match.
That's pretty lame.
Yep. Well, like I say, Booker T then moved on to that into a feud with Edge over Shampoo, so that's probably where his stock was at that point. And Austin was preparing to fight Scott Hall at WrestleMania when he finally nixed the idea of fighting Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania.
So maybe one day when we're doing like a Patreon exclusive or something, we can get into WrestleMania 18. But I think, as much as I'm a huge mark for Scott Hall, what a lame WrestleMania match for Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh yeah, that was definitely like nothing special for him. But
because when you look at the depth of talent in that company at the time, you had Angle, Flair, Taker, Hogan, even Hunter or Rock, and you give him Scott Hall and just let him run right through. It didn't seem right.
No, I think just everyone, well, most other people were in different positions. I don't think they wanted to do. I mean, most likely one would have been Austin against Angle, but they didn't want to do Angle and Austin, I assume, again after them having feuded so much during 2001. Benoit wasn't back yet. Guerrero was still suspended.
But even like they tried to put him with Guerrero, and at the time that seemed like an odd fit. It just seems like somewhere after he turned heel at WrestleMania 17, like they couldn't figure out how to book Stone Cold anymore.
I think it would have been after like deciding to go with Jericho as the undisputed champion, and it would essentially be him and Triple H for a while. I think probably the long-term idea was to have Austin come back into the world title picture around about like late 2002, 2003 time. But we know by that point in time he would take his ball and go home, as they like to say, and would only wrestle once more at WrestleMania 19. So I think a lot of things just they wanted to call him off for a little while and feud with some guys in the mid card. And to be fair, I feel like I remember Austin saying that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to have feuds in not so much the mid card, but elevate people like Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit and people like that to main event status, as opposed to him being the top guy himself.
It seems like, because often when you hear about Stone Cold taking his ball and going home, you hear, well, he didn't mind working Lesnar. He minded the booking of him working Lesnar. He didn't mind you working Guerrero. He minded how all of that was being booked. And I kind of feel like there's a lot of truth to that. Like, if you had the stroke and you can say, hey, I don't like this, I'm going home. Well, I guess you're going home.
Well, only Jeff Jarrett has the stroke, as he reminds us constantly.
Oh yes,
he's got all the stroke. A few other bits of TV news. They started a brief romance angle between The Rock and Trish Stratus.
I remember that,
which was very, very short lived. It basically stopped after Vengeance, with Trish doing some other things, and The Rock having to go after the World Championship after losing it at Vengeance. But yeah, I assume it was just the idea of The Rock's our like top babyface star, Trish is the top like female wrestler. That sounds like a perfect match.
You know what? When you consider how certain things are trending today, obviously love angles are very hot. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm surprised they don't do more of that.
Certain people that weren't feeling the love, however, were the Hardy Boys. Because obviously we'll talk about their match they have at Vengeance when we go into the bit more of a deep dive for the pay-per-view review. But their feud was essentially the idea of the fact that they'd gone fairly stale as a tag team, built around the idea of Matt Hardy being the brains of the whole operation, the more experienced, the better wrestler, Jeff Hardy being a bit more of a loose cannon, and it led to the Hardy Boys feuding and Lita and Matt breaking up on TV. But they then, for the first time. But then they shelved it pretty much immediately afterwards by having The Undertaker take out first Jeff Hardy and then Matt Hardy in hardcore matches, with the idea of just taking them off TV pretty permanently because the feud got very negative reviews from behind the scenes. And so they decided, okay, we're just going to give you a couple of months off, bring you back at the Royal Rumble, because they come back to try and seek revenge against The Undertaker in the Royal Rumble match, and then continue on with them as a tag team, completely forgetting that this rivalry ever took place. More retconning.
All things considered, not the worst idea. It does suck when you think about, hey, listen, guys, if we split up Edge and Christian, we're not going to do the TLC thing anymore. I don't think we need you guys as a tag team. Let's see if we can do something as a single. Which, of course, they would both go on to have tremendous singles careers, Jeff in particular being one of the most popular stars of all time. And I don't fault them for wanting to try it, but I always think at the end of the day, the money with them is a tag team.
Yeah, and they just needed some time away to try and freshen them up a little bit and come back with a bit more renewed ambition, but obviously that doesn't last too long because they're back in 2002. Yeah, they're back in 2002 for a little while. They feud with Brock Lesnar. Oh yeah, so the brand split didn't actually happen until post Judgment Day because they were a tag team.
I bet it was Backlash.
No, they teamed together on Judgment Day to fight Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman in a tag team match, 2002, and yeah, it was after. Yeah, so it was after that. So it was around about May, June time. I believe Hulk Hogan was WWF champion when the brand split happened, or maybe it was the Undertaker.
It was shortly before Backlash because they had already established that if Hunter loses to Hogan because Hogan's SmackDown guy, he has to stay on SmackDown with Vince.
I guess that could have been the way they went about it. It seems odd that the Hardy Boys were a tag team post that then, and then were split up and gone into separate rosters afterwards.
But they tried to split the double. It's more retconning. They try to split these things. It doesn't work. They go, hey, forget about it.
Well, they didn't get a chance to get back together before Jeff was released in early 2003 anyway, so...
Right.
So Matt had to make do with being a singles guy at that point. But that's going way beyond the 2001 limits that we're setting ourselves here.
Not going into 2002, so we're just giving you a little bit of a down the line because we won't be doing a full series.
And of course, as it was December, there was the special Christmas edition of Monday Night Raw. It featured two separate Christmas parties. One which was being hosted by Vince McMahon, which had most of the heel wrestlers on their side, and one hosted by Ric Flair, which had obviously the baby faces on that side. So they had a special Tajiri Claus versus Bubba Claus match, because they had two separate Santa Clauses each, and a Tori Wilson versus Stacy Keibler eggnog match, because 2001 women's wrestling. We'll get more into that when we talk about Vengeance. Oh, and I guess like the final thing would be on TV side of things would be our traditional title match tracker.
Oh boy, how much for December?
It is 20 title matches in December on TV, so Raw or SmackDown, not counting what happened at Vengeance. This would include Jericho, after winning the Undisputed title, defending it 4 separate times. So between December 10th onwards, he defended it 4 times, which included a cage match win over Steve Austin, which was marred by interference, a singles match over RVD, which he retained by disqualification. Well, he lost the match but retained by DQ. A triple threat win over The Rock and Angle, and a singles win over The Big Show.
Boy, we're not, hot-shotting anything.
Yeah, and also, we've now gotten to the point that now it's post the invasion, so there were 20 of those TV title matches, but no titles changed hands in those matches.
Wow.
So,
good time to be a champion. Very successful champions we have here.
Yeah, but it started to build up the idea of title matches only happening on pay-per-view, which is a bigger deal, but it seemed like they'd moved away from titles just hot potatoing from one side to the other, because now there is no sides. They're all just fighting each other.
Yeah, which I guess they can be argued that that's the better way to be.
Slightly lower down, so we're looking at OVW and the other developmental territories in WWF. There was going to be some December cuts, so people were going to be missing out on their Christmas bonuses these years. So on the 5th of December, essentially a lot of people from the developmental territory were released from their contract, including Kiwi, Lash LaRue, Russ McCulloch, who I think we've previously said in editions was Luther Reigns.
Huh.
Which is erroneous. It's not Luther Reigns. Russ McCulloch was just another individual who actually didn't have any sort of tenure with WWF beyond this release.
I think he might have been a football guy. I've heard Cornette talk about him, but never in a positive light.
Also released were Reno, Kid Romeo, Elix Skipper, S.A. Rios, James Yang, and Evan Courageous. So,
how many times does Jimmy Wang Yang go through the doors of the WWE?
I don't think it's that often.
At least three.
I know he comes in obviously as a Keto, but I don't know whether he was released after being.
He does get released in 2005, in fact.
Oh yeah, because he does go to TNA for a while, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Well, actually, no, I thought that was before that, because I know he's in the first ever TNA pay-per-view.
It's ironic that in July of, maybe it was July of 2003, somewhere around there, he gets released, and he gets released a lot from the WWF in a short period of time. So he might have that Marty Jannetty distinction about him.
It can't have been July 2003, could it? Because he was at WrestleMania 20.
Maybe it was somewhere between 2003 and 2005.
Yeah, it's probably a few months after WrestleMania 20. Because I remember his spot at WrestleMania 20 well, because he was in that Cruiserweight Open match. He was eliminated by having Tajiri just spray him with the green mist, and he never actually got into the match himself. So that one sticks in my mind. But yeah, it's in an era now where we live in where people are very rarely released. I mean, we've only just had 4 releases, which seem like monumental news at this day and age for WWE. Now, it was more apparent that people were getting cut, especially when business was starting to not so much go in a huge downturn, but they were making a lot less money than they were in 2099.
Damn.
So
they immediately start feeling the downslide, which always sucks to hear.
OVW also gets a little bit lighter as well, with Mark Henry leaving, because he'd been wrestling OVW for a while to try and get in shape and try and build up some momentum, build up some more reps in terms of his in-ring work. He left temporarily to go compete or start training to go compete at the March's World Strongest Man competition.
That's when they bring him back and immediately put him on SmackDown.
Yeah, right. Because he wins the World Strongest Man competition, and he also lifts the infamous I can't remember the name of it. Essentially, it's like the Schwarzenegger dumbbell thing. I can't remember. I don't think it's Schwarzenegger's named after it, but it's this dumbbell which has this tiny, ridiculously sized grip. So you're basically lifting it with pretty much 3 fingers almost. And he manages to get that up, and I believe he's the first man to ever do that.
That's awesome. Mark Henry is a legitimate freak of nature in the best way possible, and it's really cool that he always had a home in WWE.
Also, as we've spoken about in a previous edition, December sees Russ Haas, Charlie Haas's brother, pass away
Yeah,
due
that
to a
sucks.
heart attack at the age of 27 on the 15th of December.
Fuck,
Uh,
that's awful.
I mean, it was actually seen as quite even though he'd suffered the heart attack a couple of months earlier, it was seen as quite a shock because he was training to get back into the ring. Like they were expecting him to come back in the early weeks of January. And
Maybe it's just one of those things, he was training, a lot of stress on his heart. That's
which,
always awful to hear, though.
I know it is terrible, but it's just weird because like in the interviews that the Observer were well, not interviews, but the news that they were getting from the people behind the scenes, like doctors and stuff like that, were suggesting that his heart was doing fine, and they'd pretty much cleared him for return to the ring. I think he was waiting for a second opinion from a doctor, which may have obviously revealed something, but they didn't seem to have too much. They didn't seem to have any real fears over it happening again. Just one of those things that happens, I guess.
That totally sucks.
Yeah. Also, a final bit of OVW news was Leviathan, who will be later known a lot more famously as Drax the Destroyer.
Yeah,
Would
love
or
that guy.
Batista. Yeah, or Batista defeated the Machine, also known as Doug Basham, for his first OPW championship.
The Machine.
Yeah,
How weird is that? Like, you get so bogged down in the WWE bubble, but isn't that weird that it's like Batista's big win came over Doug Basham?
yeah. Obviously, it's for anyone who wasn't watching OVW at the time, which is probably most people listening to this, is the fact that the Doug Basham and Danny Basham were pretty big deals in the main event scene, and they decided to just bring both up as tag team because they vaguely looked like each other as balding men.
Well, specifically, because Cornette throws a wonderful fit about this. I believe they shaved Doug Basham's head because they wanted to see what he would look like bald, and he just showed up one day bald because he'd had typical long hair indie wrestler, I'm a heel kind of hair, and he just shows up one day bald.
For Jim Cornette, if you've been booking someone as a main event draw and was actually doing a pretty good job
Yeah,
for
I
a long
think
time, they
that's
said you're just going to be thrown together in the tag team with another guy you've also been booking as a main eventer, and they're just going to, we're going to just put them on SmackDown with a dominatrix, and they're going to be essentially just guys that like getting beaten up and by women, and they might win the tag team championship
was
here
that
and
their
then.
gimmick for.
Yeah, they were teamed up with Linda Miles.
I remember Linda Miles, and I guess looking back on it, I can see that she was a dominatrix.
Yeah,
But wow.
that was their gimmick. They did some like backstage segments things where they would have Shaniqua, Linda Miles, obviously but that was her name at the time, Shaniqua, just whipping them backstage with ball gags in their mouths because ruthless aggression era.
So who was the kinky guy in the writing staff that you think was fired one day, and that's when all this stuff stopped?
I mean, Heyman was writing for SmackDown at the time,
Yeah,
and he's
okay.
and he's writing
He's
for
writing for
Raw now,
Raw.
where we've got the
Okay, yeah.
Rusev and Lana
Yep.
thing and the Cucks angle and stuff like that. So I think Heyman does have a few faults in his brain about this sort of kind of stuff.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
A few other bits of news. Kevin Nash, a name that we haven't really referred to too much in the 2001 since WCW ended. His contract with Time Warner was up on the 31st of December, and he was in negotiations with both the WWF and the World Wrestling All Stars to sign up with one of them.
I'm glad he didn't go to World Wrestling All-Stars.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's happy with that decision as well. So, as most people would know, that Kevin Nash does return alongside Scott Hall and Hulk Hogan as to reform the NWO in WWF. So, yeah, there's not really much to say about that other than, Kevin Nash is back.
Yeah, I think, going back to the Stone Cold stuff, I think he should have gotten more with Austin than Scott Hall did. I think Nash was a bigger star, and it would have made more sense.
That is true, but I know out of the two of them, which one would be more willing to do the job to Steve Austin at WrestleMania.
I'm sure you pay Nash enough money, he'll lose.
I think there was just an overall issue with Kevin Nash coming back, especially among a lot of the writing staff about who'd worked with him at WCW weren't exactly looking forward to him coming back. Probably when they found out about Hogan and Hall as well, they probably just went, Vince, you crazy? You know what they did to the previous guys? By this point, I imagine Vince would have completely forgotten the WCW had even existed.
I believe the story goes Vince put up a poll, like a show of hands in the locker room. Hey, Hogan, Hall, and Nash, yeah or nay? And everybody said nay, and that's like pretty much the day he decided. All right, here they come. You don't want them here? That means they're definitely going to be here.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Hogan, a lot of this month was built around a attempt to revive the feud between Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. Not on TV or anything, just Randy Savage trying to get a match with Hulk Hogan. So he wanted to have a match with Hogan with all the proceeds from the event going to a children's hospital that Savage was associated with. But Hogan decided to pretty much avoid any challenge, and I guess with the idea that you never know if it was going to be a real match or if it was going to descend into it, because Hogan was typically quite paranoid about people shooting on him in matches.
So Savage just made a rap song instead.
Oh yeah, he'd get down the line, but I think it was just an idea of like maybe almost presenting this feud or presenting this match as an option was just a way of keeping both of them in the spotlight without either of them having to get their hands dirty.
Could have made a lot of money. Like, let's tell the truth here. It would have made a lot of money.
Well, Savage himself estimated that the match could have earned over $10 million for charity, which is funny because I don't believe that any wrestling card in the entirety of 2001 besides WrestleMania earned anywhere near that amount of money.
Sounds about right.
But just like one match deal between two guys who are pretty washed up even at this stage in their careers. I'm sure that would have put a lot of money down on the table. It would have earned. I assume it would have earned a fair amount, but I think 10 million is probably a little steep.
Would have put a lot of butts in the seats, as one Tony Schiavone would say.
There's also some great reviews coming in from WWF New York's restaurant. I say good reviews. That mean terrible reviews.
Sarcastic, right? Yeah.
So Zagat's Restaurant Guide, which is like kind of like seen as the Bible of the New York restaurant world, it received the lowest score in history for quality of food, and what could have been the lowest score in history among like quality of service. So, but I mean,
does that surprise you at all?
No, because I assume that Vince had absolutely no idea how to run a restaurant. Obviously, he's not the one in charge of running it, but I assume because he doesn't know what the restaurant needs or what quality or caliber of people it needs, he gave it to people that didn't have the standard necessary to run it properly. And I can imagine, like, a lot of the food they served was very gimmicky as well. It was all based around wrestlers or moves. So I think the main thing was the idea of our wrestling fans will just come to New York because it's WWF rather than wanting to have like great food or great service or have a good night out with friends or stuff like that. They're just here to be around the WWF merchandise and all that stuff.
I'll be honest, I think they probably would have made more money with an idea like this in the 80s if you market it as like a Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh, absolutely, they would have done. I think it was just the idea that with the amount of money that was coming in 2099, that Vince wanted to take over everything. So he wanted to take over. He wanted a New York-based restaurant. So he wanted to take over.
He bought a casino at one point. We never hear about that.
Yeah, he wanted a casino at one point. I think he wanted a chain of hotels at one point, like the SmackDown hotels.
That would have been genius.
But he wanted to obviously went with the XFL because he wanted to try and take on the heavyweights of football in the NFL. And he ended up just losing tons and tons of money, and his status from going from a billionaire to a millionaire. Obviously, he's a billionaire again now, but there was a long period in the like mid to late 2000s where he was just a millionaire.
Yeah, we say that like it's so.
Oh yeah, he's just a millionaire, just a multi-millionaire. But it's just the idea that, like, due to these poor investments, he lost a significant amount of money in that time.
Yeah.
Move on to Mick. Oh, someone who was winning a lot of money though. I'm liking these segues I'm pulling out here. Is Mick Foley on the celebrity version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Really? Foley's a smart guy. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so he appeared during December for a little while. This was filmed before December because Foley at some point during the interview talks about how he's happy to have come back to WWF as the commissioner, which obviously he did back in November. So it was recorded a little while ago, but he ended up winning $125,000 for the New York Police Fire Department's Widow and Children's Fund.
That's really nice.
Yeah, especially after the events of 9/11 and stuff like that. That was a charity that was very much in need of support. So he won a significant amount of money. So yeah, good on him.
Is there a
Always a good
better
guy.
human being in the world? Like,
Oh, he's definitely one of the most kind-hearted wrestlers that I've ever heard of. So
fantastic.
yeah, very much deserving of that. Talk a little bit about the World Wrestling All Stars. There's not really much that's going on with the XWF at this point. They're kind of in a holding pattern, just waiting to see if any sort of funding comes to them in the new year. Spoiler, it doesn't. And but in the World Wrestling All Stars, they started their tour of the United Kingdom, or they started it at the end of last month, but they continued it. All shows basically had the same lineup of matches. Finishes only occasionally changed. Not Hulk Hogan. Scott Steiner joined in for a little while to get involved in triple threat matches for the world title. It was him, Jeff Jarrett, and Road Dogg.
Right.
In most of those occasions, Scott Hall was still dealing with his club foot injury, so he wasn't exactly the most mobile in his entire career. And Road Dogg was heavily out of shape, not exactly in the best state of mind in his life. So you can imagine that most
A
of
lot
those
of
matches,
drugs, kids.
and they also all those matches ended pretty much the same, which was Jeff Jarrett talking down Bret Hart putting him in a sharpshooter, and sending the
They're
crowd
building
home.
towards the match that'll never happen because.
Yeah, exactly. Also, one night in the Glasgow show, Buff Bagwell referred to Glasgow as being in England, when of
Love
course
it.
anyone who's he just goes to typify the American attitude to geography.
Scotland? Oh, yeah, it's in England, right?
Yeah, so it was actually Glasgow's obviously in Scotland, so he was booed pretty loudly by the crowd, even though he was still working as a babyface for this entire tour. So that's just how the World Wrestling All Stars were going at this point. They would return to pay-per-view sometime in February of 2002, I believe.
And I would watch it.
Yeah, that was in Las Vegas, I believe. So
Yeah.
they returned immediately back to the good home of the USA.
And
But
they're not even from America.
final bit of news for these reheated tags. So it's not the most in-depth month, but there's at least something here. Going to talk a little bit of New Japan. Obviously, we're in the build-up now towards Wrestle Kingdom 14, which we can only assume will be an amazing show because every single Wrestle Kingdom of the last 4 or 5 years has been an amazing show.
That is totally fair. Review and preview coming your way on the Smark Out Moment YouTube channel.
Yep, we will be doing those. Hopefully, I assume they will have come out. This would have come out before then, so be sure to tick the notifications bell, everything you need to do to make sure that you can listen to it as soon as it comes out. But in this current era of 2001, the January the 4th show, which at the time I believe was called it was called Wrestling World or something to that effect. It was essentially just a Tokyo Dome show. It wasn't renamed to Wrestle Kingdom until about 2004 or 5, something like that.
Okay.
Because obviously it's Wrestle Kingdom 14 now, so there've only been 14 Wrestle Kingdoms.
I believe it was 2005.
It might have been a little bit later than that. I'm trying to just math up a little bit. I think it was around about either somewhere between 2005 and 2007. But in this Tokyo Dome show, the original idea would be that Kazuyuka Fujita would defend the World Championship against the G1 winner Yuji Nagata. However, during December, Fujita suffered a torn Achilles tendon while training, because obviously at this point in time, a lot of New Japan wrestlers were also doing MMA fights as well.
Yes,
So
Nokia's.
Yeah, so he was also training for having to do proper training as well for fights, as opposed to just pro wrestling training, and so suffered an injury, which meant that the World Championship couldn't be defended on this show. So scrambling in order to try and find a new main event, they got in touch with Pro Wrestling Noah, who at this time were probably either the second or third biggest Japanese promotion at the time.
I believe, for being real with how they were doing, they were like number one.
Oh yeah, they were at some point, especially with Kobayashi, Kenta Kobayashi as their like top star. He was one of Japan's biggest stars at the time. They were doing well, like towards the top, and New Japan at the moment was probably still high up there, but was beginning to trend downwards the same way as All Japan was. So they decided to thrust GHC heavyweight champion Jun Akiyama into the main event, and he would defend against Yuji Nagata instead. And he would retain his championship over Yuji Nagata. There was also obviously the big question was who would be the next IWGP heavyweight champion, because Vegeta ended up vacating the championship, with the title being decided at the February pay-per-view in a tournament, with the final being Tadao Yasuda defeating Yuji Nagata in the final. So Nagata got stiffed on both World Championship matches. Didn't end up winning either of them. Yasuda was kind of a redemption story, because he'd only come back from a severe like gambling addiction, which had cost him a lot of money, because he used to be a very prominent sumo wrestler and then pro wrestler on the side as well. He came back after winning a MMA fight on the New Year's Eve show that Antonio Inoki presented against this guy called Jerome Labana. So he won that match, and so they decided to try and push him as like, okay, this guy's come back from a severe problem in his personal life, and it's just a huge turnaround story, but he didn't end up being that prominent or like popular as a champion beyond the initial like, oh well, this guy's won, and then it just kind of faded away pretty quickly. It also didn't help with the fact that on that New Year's Eve show, Yuji Nagata was also in a fight, and he got knocked out in 21 seconds by Mirko Krokop. Because Mirko Krokop, for anyone who knows like mixed martial arts, was a pretty big deal.
World champion. It was the UFC World Champion, I believe.
Yeah, but definitely at multiple points in his career, I believe he was the UFC World Champion. And Nagata, as good as a wrestler, an amateur wrestler that he is, was definitely not at his level even at this point in Krokop's career, because it's quite early on in Krokop's career. But so that probably didn't hold him up very well to Inoki, who wanted his world champions in like pro wrestling to be like legitimate, as well as just like being top draws in the pro wrestling sense. Just more problems in New Japan.
I mean, totally fair, but wrestling is wrestling. MMA is MMA. There are always going to be similarities, but the two shouldn't be seen as equals.
Yeah, and I think it's also the case that not like some of the most popular or the biggest not New Japan MMA stars really get over because of elements of pro wrestling in terms of their promo ability and their ability to hype up matches and the personality and the characters they show. It doesn't really matter it does matter that they have to be good as well, but that kind of I wouldn't say it's secondary, but it works alongside that. It's why Conor McGregor could probably lose quite a few more matches and still be seen as a draw.
Yeah, because wrestling knows what it is and knows that outside stars are always going to make money.
So that's it for the reheated tags. So a bit of like I said, a light month for December, but we move on to our pay-per-view review, which is a pretty significant show in the grand scheme of things. Vengeance 2001. December 9th, 2001, from the San Diego Sports Arena. A reported 11,800 in attendance. Vengeance 2001, it was only named Vengeance post 9/11 because they were originally going to go with the Armageddon name again, because that had been the name of their typical December pay-per-views up to that point. But Armageddon was cancelled temporarily. It would return in 2002.
Was that like a 9/11 thing?
Yeah, they just didn't want it to be. They didn't want it to be associated with the phrase Armageddon.
I guess that's fair.
So they instead went with Vengeance. Vengeance would also stick around as a pay-per-view name for a while, but it would revert to a July time in the calendar instead, a June-July time in the calendar instead of December. After this, in which case it scored 315,000 buys compared to Armageddon 2000's 465,000 buys. So a pretty significant drop. But I guess that's to be expected at this point in time.
Well, I mean, Armageddon 2000 was headlined by 6 dudes in Hell in a Cell, and by 2001, I think the feeling could have been that you've seen all the stars and everything everybody has to offer.
I think it was just like it's more of an indication of just a drop in overall popularity of WWF, because even though that does have the Armageddon Hell in a Cell match, which is obviously a big deal and a highly remembered match, this one did have the crowning of the first undisputed champion, and it would have The Rock, Austin, Angle, and Jericho. So you would assume it would at least be pretty comparable. But 150,000 by drop basically presents that WWF isn't the big thing anymore. This is also
and it would remain that way.
There's also the final WWF pay-per-view to be aired on Channel 4 in the UK, which is a big deal for like UK viewers, any UK people listening. Channel 4 is a terrestrial TV show or TV channel, which means that it's basically free to watch, like pretty much like I assume Fox is.
So were the pay-per-views free to watch?
Well, they were free to watch in the UK for those shows. WWF had a deal with Channel 4 to broadcast 4 pay-per-views per year, pretty much free for the audience. And this was at a time when Channel 4 wasn't hugely established in the UK. It was originally the UK only had 2 television shows, which were BBC and ITV. And then eventually they got BBC 2, which, like further down the line. But Channel 4 was going to be like the new channel, and they were throughout the 1990s they were trying to get more of a like fan interaction and get like more notoriety. So I think part of that was getting the WWF deal when WWF was like a big global phenomenon in the late 90s.
So it's called ITV4 now. Did they merge?
No, ITV4 is different. It's a different channel.
So it's not like they merged ITV and Channel 4.
No, Channel 4 is on its own, still separate. So now we've got it. Just if anyone's interested in who's not living in the UK, how the channels kind of work. There's a BBC One, a BBC Two. There used to be a BBC Three, but now it's called BBC World, I think. And there's ITV1, ITV2, ITV3, and ITV4. ITV4, for instance, is where AEW is now currently shown. And there's Channel 4, there's Channel 5, there's shows like More 4, which is like an additional Channel 4. Essentially, they've just taken those 4 or 5 base shows and just expanded them outwards. And that's pretty much what free television in the UK is if you don't have Sky or something like that.
Okay, so here it's NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox, with Fox being kind of like the Channel 4 in that it came on much later and tried to disrupt the established channels. So that's interesting to see the parallels.
Obviously, because this will be the final pay-per-view to air on Channel 4, because essentially they weren't a lot of people in Channel 4's higher up weren't particularly happy with the very, very edgy direction of WWF stuff, especially the violence towards women angles. This meant that all pay-per-views would in future be just hosted on Sky Box Office, and so you'd have to pay to watch them.
Fair, but I think that's pretty cool that you would have a free option 4 times a year.
Yeah, but that was obviously good for a while. I guess with the dwindling popularity overall of wrestling, that was also probably a factor into it as well, that less people were watching the shows.
Do you happen to know? Because I know you started watching wrestling after this, so you wouldn't know like what were typically the 4 shows.
No, I don't know for certain. I think it changed from year to year. It definitely wasn't WrestleMania. Was definitely not a show. I think Royal Rumble was in 2001.
Oh, that's really, really cool.
I can't remember any of the particular other ones. I think there might have been something to do with... It might have been Backlash this year, because I know there was like annoyance around about the Channel 4 side of things about the attacks of the 2-man power trip attacking Lee with a steel chair. That was probably one of the not so much straws that broke the camel's back, but it was one of the things that was a red flag to them about, okay, maybe we don't want to be associated with this company anymore. So let's talk about the actual show itself. So they got a lot of mileage out of Freddie Blassie in 2001.
Oh yeah.
So he's here again doing the intro video package, which is built around the feud for the Undisputed Championship, using the tune of Edvard Einstein Grieg's Peer Gynt in the Hall of the Mountain King, which is probably one of the most famous pieces of classical music ever composed. Even though people probably don't know the name of what I was just saying, they would know the tune if I was to sing it out, which I'm not going to do because we don't want to get flagged.
Well, I happen to know that these are Vince's favorite video packages, like the classic music, the Freddie Blassie. These are his favorite.
Oh yeah, I'm sure, because they pretty much did it throughout the entirety of 2001. So then there's a really sharp contrast when the pyro goes off, and then we're introduced to the actual theme of the show, which is "Sinner" by Drowning Pool.
Oh, we just two totally different worlds, from classic music to new metal. Drowning Pool got a lot of play for 6 months with WWE because they had Bodies at SummerSlam, they had Sinner here, and then they had, I believe, Tearaway at WrestleMania.
Yeah, it's one of those go-to bands from the late Attitude Era going into the Ruthless Aggression era type. That's one of the people that fits into those categories alongside people like Saliva, and I guess you can kind of put Limp Bizkit in that bracket. Maybe Limp Bizkit is a bit outside of that reach, like things like Seaver and things like that. It's basically like a playlist for just new metal was pretty much watching WWF pay-per-views.
Yeah, which is why as much shit as new metal gets, it is our whole childhood because of WWE.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So unlike most pay-per-views that we've seen this year, it starts with a promo segment, which probably would be a big red flag for people heading into the future years of WWF, of every single show having to start with a promo segment. Vince comes out, he talks about how what basically recaps the entire thing that happens, which I thought was probably pretty redundant as you go forward, because they actually show an entire video replay of the Vince McMahon kissing Rikishi's ass. So it's just okay, we're just eating up time here, with McMahon just saying about how people shouldn't laugh at him, and how they shouldn't laugh at the misfortune of billionaires, which is a great line, and they should only laugh when Vince tells them to, because obviously if Vince finds it funny, everyone should find it funny.
I think that Vince McMahon is the greatest character of all time.
He probably is. I think a lot of people would agree with you in that assessment.
Because you could sit there and say he doesn't get it, but for the man to come out on TV and say, "You're only gonna laugh when I tell you to laugh, and I'm gonna tell you what you enjoy and you're gonna like it," he completely knows what the public perception of him is.
Oh yeah, he got his own character down perfectly. I think even at this point, it'd be safe to say, in 2001, Vince was starting to lose things a little bit, but he still pretty much knew how to get his character right. He knew how to book most of the top names. Obviously, now we live 18 years in the future, so things are a little bit different.
Right.
Ric Flair comes out, tells Vince to be quiet, and just wants to get the show started. And the show gets started with the opener, which is Scotty 2 Hotty and Albert versus Christian and Test. That's a pretty interesting way to start the final pay-per-view of the year.
What the fuck? That's awful.
So, one thing that I was quite interested about in this entire show was the lighting. And I'm not usually one to really draw on the aesthetics of the arena and stuff like that, but especially on this first match, it looked like they were fighting in fog for a long time. Maybe it's because
might have been one of those arenas that did not clear pyro very well.
Yeah, so after all the big explosions at the start of it, the ventilation hadn't really worked out, and so they were you could just barely make out a lot of the people in the crowd because it was all smoky.
I believe the UK used to have a lot of those problems.
Yeah, I don't think our stadiums were kind of built up for the idea of indoor pyro taking place. This was just a pretty basic tag team match. So this is when Scotty Hotty and Albert are doing the hip hop hippo gimmick.
God damn, Callum, every word that's coming out of your mouth is just so painful to hear. It's even more painful to watch. And I mean, we go back and watch these events, and I have a hard time not fast forwarding to the bits that I know are good, because some of this shit is just painful.
I actually enjoyed this match.
I
I
did
thought,
not like the pairing of Scotty 2 Hotty and Albert.
oh no, it definitely wasn't anything special, and it ran its course very quickly afterwards. But I thought that there was some good stuff in this match. I thought Christian and Test worked pretty well as a team. They did this. Albert showed the first ever signal that I'd seen in a WWF show at the very least of using the giant swing, which obviously Cesaro would do far better in later years.
Yes.
But I thought there was a really good spot towards the end where they do. Christian is pretty much set up for Scotty Hotty's Bulldog, so he can set up for the worm. But Christian reverses that into reverse DDT and then goes for his own worm. And yeah, it's just very basic, like simple stuff. But that stuff this was what an opening match should be, which was just straightforward, get the baby faces a win because Albert does end up pinning Christian after hitting him with the Bulldog bomb, and yeah, it's just harmless fun. It's nothing major, but yeah, it's not going to hurt anybody.
I
Inoffensive.
guess that's fair.
It's an inoffensive, like babyface winning tag team match. I think there's probably the argument to be made that Christian and Tess should have been seen as bigger deals by this point, but I guess they were pushing other people at this point in time.
That's my argument. Is that I definitely think Christian Test should have been seen as bigger.
So we move on past the opener to William Regal having an interview with Jonathan Coachman. So it's pretty obvious at this point in time that they were transitioning William Regal's character from being kind of like the more comic relief, goofy one, because obviously he was the first person to join the Kiss My Ass Club, and they decided to use that as a motivation to turn Regal into a bit more of a vicious, aggressive brawler character.
Well, he'd been besmirched, you see.
Yeah,
and you can't be besmirched. Just take that lying down.
So this leads on into the Intercontinental Championship match with Edge defending against William Regal. I mean, this is where it starts to go a little bit like middling. I would say for a pay-per-view that ends in such a way which is supposed to be very, very memorable and like symbolic and historic, this is pretty dull for the most part. This pay-per-view, and this match is a kind of clear example of it. Like it's just a match that's happening in front of you. Nothing. If I hadn't written down any notes, I couldn't tell you a single thing that happened in the match. It really, really just is by the numbers.
And I think you're seeing a WWE that's very much trying to find its new identity.
So the few things that were in any way like notable, Edge does a top rope Hurricane Rana at some point in the match, which is kind of like you wouldn't expect Edge, well, the Edge that we know nowadays, to do that sort of move, but he was doing a lot more high flying stuff at that point in his career.
He was a lot smaller. I had just watched a match that also takes place not too far from this, and he's a lot more light and more light heavyweight cruiserweight style.
Edge at one point misses a like a spear from the apron and ends up hitting the steel steps, which allows Regal to do what was also his new gimmick at the time, which was always grabbing brass knuckles from somewhere. So he'd hidden a pair of brass knuckles under the ring apron and so pulled them out from by the ring post and was setting up to use them, but Edge ends up hitting him with a spear and retaining the championship out of nowhere. I think the quick spear to finish it was kind of to set up the idea that Regal was actually the better man in this match, but Edge just pulled it out in the last minute.
And I think because Edge, more than most main event guys, had trouble establishing a finisher. He used to do the downward spiral, then they tried to get the DDT over, and I think they finally landed on the spear because it's sudden. But in all seriousness, I was never fond of the spear.
No,
for him at least, just because he's a little smaller.
Yeah, it's fine for someone like a Goldberg or a Rhino or Batista to use it.
Yeah, like Roman does it, and I'm like, okay, but Edge always felt a little weird.
I think Edge made it work eventually with essentially the preparation for it, like where he goes down the corner, sits up, his eyes go wild, that sort of thing. It kind of builds the spear into something a bit more special than just a move. So eventually he got it. I think at this point in time, the spear is just, I guess people just cheered for it because of the impact of it.
Right, and it's sudden, and it's like, oh, look at that. You can hit it from anywhere, practically.
Fun little backstage segment where Kurt Angle is with Ric Flair. Angle calls Flair a 14-time world champion in this segment.
Because we're not. Wait, I was gonna say we're not counting the two from WWE, but
This is
they absolutely should.
Flair never wins. Like, spoiler alert, never wins another world championship beyond this point. But they end up referring to him later on as a 16-time world champion as opposed to a 14-time world champion. And I don't know the exact moment where that changes.
My guess being they weren't counting dumb shit like Kevin Nash just handing him the belt. I mean, like, you're champion now.
Potentially. I think there's a lot of arguments being made that there is no real consensus over how many world championship Ric Flair has actually won.
He's won at like 30 for real.
Well, there's a lot of I guess mid-tier championships like the Southwestern heavyweight championship, those sort of things. There's a lot of consensus with the idea that it falls somewhere between 14 and 20. How many actual world championships?
Because there's like phantom switches, like he'll drop it to Giant Baba at the beginning of a tour of Japan, and then he'll just pick it back up before he has to go home. Because, people didn't know every little thing back then.
Yeah. So they just get into a back and forth where Angle's basically saying, I'm going to win this match. Oh, yeah, I'm going to win this match. Whereas Flair's saying, okay, yeah, you can do it. Go on, go and prove it. And it seems like Angle's trying to bait Flair into disagreeing with him. And Flair's just saying, no, that's fine. Yeah, I'm sure you can do it. I'm sure you'll do well. And then he just leaves, disgruntled. Then we have Lita backstage with Matt Hardy. Lita saying that she's going to call this match entirely down the middle because she is a special guest referee for the match between Matt and Jeff. Matt's kind of just says, okay, that's fine because I'm going to beat Jeff anyway and we're going to celebrate afterwards. And he just leaves and Lita's just there getting ready.
Did you like this match?
Well, it's Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy, and no, I did not like this match.
Yeah, me neither.
It's not terrible, but it's the weird thing about how Jeff and Matt are two. Most people would go back, regardless of some of the decisions they've made in their personal lives, would go back and say these two were pretty great wrestlers.
Yes.
But they never had a really good match with each other.
No.
Even their feud in the up to WrestleMania 25 was pretty bad. Nothing particularly special. But yeah, this match wasn't particularly great. I think they tried. The issue is, I think they tried to wrestle too much and didn't do too much in the Hardy style things. They tried to mix it up a little bit with Matt going a bit more ground-based offense, that type of stuff, whereas Jeff would do a little bit, a few interesting things every now and again, but would just often revert to type. And the crowd was pretty just over it between these two pretty quickly. This match also goes way, way too long.
Fair.
It's probably 5 minutes too long. If it's 5 minutes shorter and they just do a little bit more of their Hardy Boys high impact stuff and maybe save just a bit more aggressive brawling, then it would be a bit more well received. But because they slowed it down so early and it was so unlike a Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy tag team match, the crowd just couldn't get into it.
I think for today's viewers, if you want to see, it's like if you put on Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa and they just put on a headlock for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'd probably try and equate it to that. That's the example of a tag team that break up and then having an awesome feud coming off the back of it. Whereas these two just, I guess they just didn't click as opponents in the same way as they clicked as tag team partners. But
Yeah.
So at one point, Matt tries to use the ropes for leverage during a pinfall, and Lita stops him. So there's growing seeds of dissension between those two. Matt goes for a top rope twist of fate, but it's blocked. Jeff hits the swanton, and although Matt gets his foot on the ropes during the pin, Jeff pulls it off because Lita doesn't see that his foot gets on the ropes. So Jeff gets the win. Matt leaves angrily as Lita raises Jeff's hand because he should have been. He should have gotten out of it. Yeah, he didn't see that he'd gotten out of the pin. So yeah, it'll just lead to later on there's a segment where Matt is just angrily collecting his stuff and collecting his bags, and Lita's trying to say apologise for the fact that she didn't see that his foot was on the rope, and he just storms out angrily.
Not a bad start. But
nah.
Really, they were trying to serve too many masters, I think, here. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so they had a rematch say a rematch on the next episode of Raw. It was a handicap match with Jeff and Lita against Matt Hardy. Matt would end up winning the match by pinning Lita after a roll up, and that's pretty much where it ended, because I believe on the next episode of SmackDown or next episode of Raw, they have Undertaker versus Jeff Hardy for the Hardcore Championship. Undertaker puts him through like a load of tables and stuff like that, and so they take out Jeff. Matt goes in to fight the Undertaker to try and get revenge for his brother, and then he gets taken out as well, and then they're off TV for a while.
There's not much else you can say here. I really feel like it was quite bland.
Trish Stratus knocks on The Rock's locker room. Trish just wishes him good luck, kiss on the cheek, to follow up from like a previous like backstage segment where they kissed for real. Rock prevents her from leaving just to let her know that the only thing he's thinking about tonight is becoming Undisputed Champion. But after they both win, there'll be plenty of time to fuck afterwards. Which is pretty much what he said in his in the Rock way of saying it. But I'm just cutting through. I'm just translating from Rock to English.
And that's fair. And to be fair, he's right. There's always time to fuck.
Yeah. But then we have the World Tag Team Titles match, which is the Dudley Boys defending against Kane and the Big Show.
The Kane Show.
Yeah. So this was obviously Kane was left kind of out in the wilderness because the Undertaker had turned heel, so he needed a new tag team partner, and so he went for the biggest guy he could find, which is the Big Show.
Very WWF.
Yeah. Obviously, Kane and Big Show ended up being, in later years, a pretty formidable tag team champions. Just wasn't to be on this edition. Even though they dominated most of the match, where Big Show and Kane, essentially by being almost twice the size of both their opponents, would just outpower them, throw them around the ring. At one point, Big Show pulls Stacey. Well, Stacey's gone into the ring to try and complain to the referee. Big Show pulls her pants down and just spanks her because, yay, women.
What are we talking about here?
It's women's revolution stuff. Yeah, just like. JR, there's always something about this because I tend to, because of years of watching like modern day WWE, I tend to tune out commentary. But there's two situations. One, I'm always listening to Jerry Lawler during a women's match because you kind of have to because of some of the stuff that he says, just to try and pick it out. And then I'm always listening more to JR during a Big Show match.
Because he's going to make some food puns.
Because he's going to make some kind of hidden message about how Big Show's fat and should get in shape. He basically says this phrase during it, which I thought was like the most like subliminal of the messages he's done so far, which is Big Show can make the most simple of moves look extraordinary. Which I think is basically him saying Big Show only does simple stuff because he can't do anything extraordinary in the ring himself.
Hey, he's not wrong.
At one point, I think this is the second time this happened during our recaps, Kane's boot becomes undone. And as soon as that happens, because I'm sure it happened on another match during this series, I can't stop watching the boot. Like, it's so annoying. It's like just flapping open. It's like I can't pay attention to anything else in the match.
Kane is a bit clumsy. I mean, we've seen in recent years, the mask will just fall off his face.
Yeah, what's he holding it with? Like, is it just a Velcro boot?
Might be.
Because it's just like part of it just coming undone. It's not like it's like the boot is coming undone, like his laces have come untied or whatever. It's just a bit of it is just flapping open.
He might have bootstraps.
Yeah, it just seems odd. Anyway, what this ends up being is the two like Kane and Big Show, because they hadn't teamed together much, to start to have some poor communication. So Kane goes for a flying clothesline on Devon, but he misses and hit Big Show. They square up to each other because Big Show's unhappy that Kane had accidentally attacked him. Then Big Show tends to charge Bubba and ends up hitting Kane off the apron. And this allows the Dudley Boys to hit essentially a double flapjack, but it's supposed to be like a modified 3D, sending Big Show's head first into the exposed turnbuckle, and then they pin Big Show and retain the championships. I honestly, I was kind of just happy that it wasn't some combination of the Dudley Boys, the Hardy Boys, and Edge and Christian in a tag team match. Because as good as those matches can be, I was pretty much over it. So the fact that there was it was another tag team at least gave me a bit of an edge, or at least made me feel a bit happier about it. But it's just a match.
I like the team of Kane and Big Show.
I think they definitely got a lot better as in their later incarnations as tag team champions.
They're one of my more favorite teams. Not of all time, just if you're gonna put two dudes together, it makes sense to put the two biggest dudes together.
Yeah. So we move on to the Hardcore Championship match between RVD defending against The Undertaker. So this is where things I don't say pick up a little
my
bit,
favorite
but
match in the show.
But it's definitely one of the better matches. So this is about as obviously hardcore wrestling has a bad reputation. Not I would say bad reputation, but it's got a reputation of just being. It can be done really well occasionally, and it can also be done really badly more often than not. Of just a bunch of guys just hitting each other with stuff. This is an example of a hardcore match done really well, which is RVD trying to use his speed and quickness advantage and his environment around him to try and take down The Undertaker, while The Undertaker is just interested in beating the crap out of RVD. So they quickly move from the ring into the crowd. Undertaker uses a fan's Mexico flag to choke out RVD at one point. Just one of those examples. I would be really, really surprised if that fan was a plant. So I imagine there was just a good bit of improvisation.
Hey man, if it's there, use it.
Undertaker at one point stands on RVD's head when RVD is under a metal fence, which I thought, how do you do that safely? But
you don't?
Yeah, I know. So I guess he didn't really care. It is 2001 Undertaker after all. At one point, RVD just jumps off the off a bit of the stands, on a crossbody onto Undertaker on a bunch of dusty mats. It's it just lands, and then there's just a huge puff of dust goes into the air. That's a good 2 count. There's a snake eyes by the Undertaker that sends RVD right into the really head first right into part of the stage. A rolling thunder on the entrance ramp. RVD escapes a last ride by climbing up the stage a little bit.
This was the era where they really enjoyed climbing the stage.
Yeah, they didn't care about people's well-being or safety at all. They were doing that stuff a lot.
When's the last time you saw somebody trying to climb the Monday Night Raw set or something?
Well, how often do we see them actually fight around that area?
That's true too.
It's very rare. It was definitely happening a lot more at this point in time, so they had to do those sort of things to keep it interesting. RVD misses a Van Daminator with Undertaker kind of teetering off the stage, but he's caught in a chokeslam instead, and then he's chokeslammed off the stage through tables and other miscellaneous items. Undertaker falls down and covers him with this expression on his face of oh my god, this is let this be over, that type of face. Undertaker was selling quite a lot for RVD in this match, which probably I imagine DDP was watching backstage and thinking, what the fuck?
Motherfucker, But it was clear Rob Van Dam was going to be a star.
Oh yeah, I think I almost believe that this would be the transition from RVD. He'd outgrown the Hardcore Championship and he needed something a bit bigger. Obviously, RVD would end up winning the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 18.
Yeah.
So he was rising up the ranks at this point, and Undertaker would hold the Hardcore Championship for a little while, up until I think it was around about February 2002, where he loses it to Maven.
That's thinking, everybody.
Yeah, yes. After the infamous Royal Rumble spot, he then also loses the Hardcore Championship to Maven, thanks to a big assist from The Rock. And then
because we couldn't possibly. How wild would this be if you had The Rock and Undertaker fight at No Way Out? And it's here, look, The Rock's hardcore champion.
Yeah. So that was that one. So yeah, it's probably it's definitely one of the better matches of the night, if not the best one.
Right.
Ric Flair's backstage with Chris Jericho. Jericho basically does the same thing that Kurt Angle did. The idea that no one can believe he can win the Undisputed Championship. Then Flair says that he'll gladly present the Undisputed Championship to whoever wins the next night on Raw. Then we move on to probably the worst match of the night, which is Trish Stratus versus Jacqueline for the Women's Championship.
Now, if you say to me Trish and Jackie in 2019, I'll tell you, that might be good. It's got two girls that know how to work. This is 2001 Trish. who's just transitioning from slut, basically, to a wrestler.
Yeah. Basically, a lot of this is listening to Lawler on commentary and how much of a pig he's becoming, or he was at this point in time in his career.
Becoming, he says.
All right, so Lawler at some point says that both Trish and Jackie look pumped up for this match, and I don't assume he was referring to how like worked up or excited they were for this match. It's probably more just like a couple of elements of their body that were pumped up. Let's say Lawler at one point when they do this replay of the spot was more concerned about establishing that Trish's bra was black than actually what the move was that took place or what the effect of it was.
Yeah.
Trish was terrible at running the ropes at this point in her career. Like, that's the one thing I really took away. Like, obviously there was some bad elements in this match altogether, but like she really couldn't run the ropes at this point.
Which is weird because you saw her 365, right?
Yeah.
She clearly trained to be a wrestler and then like unlearned it to be a better TV slut and then had to relearn how to be a wrestler.
Well, some people like they sometimes just lose the basics over time. I assume like for a lot of the time that she was just portrayed on TV, she wasn't really training that much as a wrestler because she was being portrayed as a valet. But even though she was doing, and some elements don't take a bit more time to do. Rope running is something that a lot of people probably could stand to be better at nowadays. Like, there's two ends of the spectrum. There's Trish in this match, and then there's someone like the Undertaker bouncing off the ropes. Because Undertaker would just, it was almost surprising that Undertaker never took the ropes with him when he bounced off them. He hit them so hard.
Yeah.
There's one point in this match where like Trish does a kick to Jackie, and it's not really a chick kick because she only hits like the side of Jackie. Jackie goes down pretty hard, and then she starts complaining to the referee, pushing the referee away. And I feel like maybe that was not intentional, but like Trish actually hurt Jackie there, and Jackie was getting angry about it. Because Jackie then gets really aggressive when she's attacking Trish and stomping her.
Yeah, well, that's that old veteran. You're gonna pay some dues here.
Yeah, Trish at one point goes for a stratisfaction, but is thrown off before the landing, and then Jackie hits a running drop kick to the back of Trish's head. Both at one point are supposed to like clash heads out of the corner, but they both kind of miss and so hit shoulder to shoulder. And then Trish pretty soon after backslides Jackie to retain the title. Like really, just it's not even a nothing match; it's just a bad match.
Yeah.
Trish fortunately would get a lot better. Jackie was probably can't be blamed too much for the quality of this match.
I think it's fair to say it's all Trish's fault. I mean, again, she was well on her way to becoming the legend she would become, but she was really transitioning from being a TV slut.
So we have the extended highlight reel video package of Vince kissing Rikishi's ass, and then Rikishi's at the World like celebrating that happening and saying that at one point he thought he was going to need to have Vince's head surgically removed from his ass, and then he's back now and he's ready to take out more people. So that was just a little like return thing for Rikishi.
So I hear that was Vince basically saying to the rest of the roster, listen, if I tell you to kiss my bare ass, I'll bury my face in some man's bare ass and tell him to fart in it. Do you believe that? Like,
well, no, I think there's always been like this general rule that Vince asks the stuff from his wrestlers because there's nothing that he wouldn't do to get a reaction. So I think this was just one of those examples of Vince will go further than anyone else to get to do what he wants to do in the ring, and that's his argument for like the other wrestlers, like they should be able to do that sort of stuff as well. If he's willing to do it, everyone should be able to do it.
It's a fair argument.
Then we have the first of our Undisputed Championship qualifiers, which is Steve Austin versus Kurt Angle for the WWF Championship. Now, we've seen these two wrestle a lot towards the back end of 2001, and this is probably the weakest match out of all of them between these two.
Yeah, but it was designed that way.
Yeah, I guess they didn't want it to be like super amazing, and obviously this is now the roles are pretty much reversed because Angle is the heel in this match and Austin is the babyface. Most of this is built around the idea of Angle quite aggressively against Austin's legs and injuring his legs a few times by wrapping it around the ring post in a figure four, using the ankle lock quite regularly. Angle then at one point hits the 3 consecutive German suplexes, and then Austin later on in the match hits 5 consecutive German suplexes. Why I say consecutive? He wasn't exactly maintaining waist control.
Yet.
Yeah, he was just getting up next to Angle and then hitting another suplex. His ones weren't quite as crisp as Angle's are.
You think he missed being a worker? Because stunning Steve Austin was a worker.
I think that's why he wanted to work in 2002 with people like Benoit and Guerrero, because he wanted to have great matches.
He's probably really missing that.
Yeah, I think he was kind of at this point in his career pretty done with not I would say done, but more focused on having great matches and building up that kind of reputation again, as opposed to being involved in the top angles and stuff like that, and being more of a soap opera babyface.
Can you blame him?
No, I can't. No, I think I'm sure he would have reverted back if his career had extended a few years later. He would have gone back to that, but I imagine he wanted 2001, 2002, 2003 to be about, okay, I'm gonna up my work rate. I'm gonna work with these great guys. They're gonna help me get through some matches because I know my body's not up to it as it used to be anymore. That type of thing. So the match continues. Angle at one point mule kicks Austin with the referee distracted, and then Austin kicks out the Angle slam. Angle then gets frustrated. He goes for the Stone Cold Stunner. Austin blocks it, throws him off the ropes, hits his own stunner, and then it's just a win. Considering how many stunners Angle kicked out of the babyface, to just get beaten by one stunner completely was probably just a bit out of nowhere. But yeah, this was. I mean, these two couldn't have a bad match, but I would say it's probably quite pedestrian by their standards.
I would honestly argue the same for the upcoming match with Jericho and Rock. These 4 dudes were the best 4. I feel like maybe you should have, hindsight 2020, maybe I would have gone with one final time Rock and Austin and let Triple H, go after one of those two. Not that Jericho's obviously one of my favorites of all time, but it didn't click. Everything that Jericho does from the minute he pins The Rock on this show up until maybe May doesn't click for me.
So before we move on to the World Championship match, they manage to squeeze in a little bit of TNA stuff. Actually, pretty close to TNA because it's Test and Trish Stratus in a backstage segment where Tess just barges in on Trish with a towel around her chest, basically saying that he's here to give her a congratulations kiss after she kissed The Rock in a previous segment a few weeks ago. Trish says no chance that's happening, and when Tess gets aggressive, she just pushes him out of the office or the dressing room they were in. So yeah, that's I guess that's
uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was very uncomfortable, but
no,
Tess' character was a lot like that.
But if you're gonna do that, you have to have the woman kick the guy in the balls or something. You can't just, he's getting aggressive. Let me get him out of the office, and I'm safe. Because that's really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I guess it's fortunate they didn't go a certain direction they could have gone with it, but they don't do that sort of stuff on TV, as they've said multiple times. So we have Rock vs. Chris Jericho for the World Championship. It's no longer the WCW Championship, it's just the World Championship.
How'd you feel with that?
WCW doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, but I don't know how. For example, I like the idea of one being the WWE World title and one being the WWE Universal title. I don't know how I felt about, well, this is the WWE belt and this is the WWE World. That's just confusing to me. I
think it was just, I guess it works if you go with the context of that's just the name they decided to temporarily give to it before it would become the Undisputed Championship. Just because the other one's called the WWF Championship, so that's the one that everyone knows. And so they had to just give this one a different name in order to just separate it from the other one for the time being. But I thought this match was probably the better. It was definitely the better of the 2 title matches before the Undisputed Championship match.
Rock and Jericho never had a bad match.
No, they have a lot. It's clear their chemistry is still pretty much working together. They do some good chain wrestling to start off with. JR notes on commentary how Jericho is the only man in this tournament never to ever be officially WWF champion.
Well, hindsight, again, really tipping your hand there.
A little bit, yeah. At one point, Rock kicks out the Lion Saw, where Jericho has a tantrum, pushes Earl Hebner around, and Earl Hebner pushes him back. They do the typical world main event spot of having a giant brawl outside the ring for a while. At one point, Jericho tries to set up for a rock bottom through the announce table. Rock reverses it into a DDP on DDT, not a DDP, a DDT onto the announce table. DDP just pops out of nowhere and he takes the spot to Jericho.
God, Rock just threw DDP at Chris Jericho.
Yeah. That wouldn't be a bad thing. That'd be a good thing as well. So at one point, there's another extended outside fight. Jericho fights out the rock bottom and hits the breakdown, which still doesn't look good with Jericho using it. It's probably the only thing like I said, the only thing that I could confidently say that the Miz does better than Chris Jericho is the skull crushing finale.
It's really interesting that not only did that not connect, but they would not pursue a grapple finisher for Jericho.
No, obviously he wouldn't get that until we introduced the Code Breaker in 2007. Then we have Jericho goes for the People's Elbow at one point, but Rock grabs the legs and goes for a sharpshooter, but Jericho pretty quickly reverses it into his own sharpshooter. I think it's quite interesting in this match that Jericho doesn't go for the Walls of Jericho.
Yeah. I think I'm going to guess that, again, it's establishing a top heel as you don't tap out the babyface, you know?
I think it's partly that. Also, I feel like he might have thought that it's a law of diminishing returns, with the idea that if he applies the Walls of Jericho in this match, it won't get as big a reaction when he applies it in the match with Austin that's coming up.
That's true. Doesn't Austin actually apply it?
Yeah, he's the one that actually forces Jericho to tap out to it, as we'll discuss. But then there's Rock hits the rock bottom, but he can't make the cover quickly enough, and Vince runs to ringside to try and distract him. Rock hits McMahon. Rock is basically fighting Vince and Jericho at the same time. He drags Vince in the ring, hits People's Elbow on Jericho, and then just beats Vince McMahon repeatedly in the corner. While the referee's trying to get Vince out of the ring, Jericho hits a low blow and then hits a rock bottom, and actually pins the Rock after hitting him with his own finisher.
Very interesting way to do that.
We don't see that enough anymore, do we? People stealing each other's finishers.
We see it on occasion. I think the main problem being nobody's got established. Like, really, okay, this is only you. Like, Adam Cole does the super kick, but so does everybody. You know?
Yeah,
I don't think since Cena and Rock are probably the last two to do it. With the whole, I'm going to steal your finisher and, try to beat you with your own move.
So we move on to immediately after Jericho wins and he's holding the championship, Austin's music hits and we're ready for the Undisputed Championship match. Austin gets in the ring and he starts getting in Jericho's face a little bit and he punches him once, but I feel like he's stalling because he knows the Angle's coming out and they might be in just a little bit of a mistiming issue. Angle eventually comes out and he hits Austin in the back of the head or hits him with a steel chair to the head. As Jericho starts to celebrate and thinks that he's easily got a win, Rock runs into the ring and rock bottoms Jericho again, and then he goes chasing Angle out of it, and then we have the title match with both the guys just laid out to start with. Then it just becomes a pretty standard match. I don't think Austin and Jericho work that much together in a singles capacity.
I think they do this match. They might have done one earlier in the year.
Yeah, they did one earlier in the year when Austin was the heel and Jericho, I think, fought him for the WWF Championship at one point in a singles match.
Like right before King of the Ring, right?
Yeah.
And I think they do No Way Out and the cage match, and that's it.
Yeah, there's really not much between these two. They don't have the most instantaneous chemistry, but it's not that bad. At one point, Jericho locks in a Fujiwara armbar, which is very unique on his side of things. I think they were just trying a load of stuff. Austin at one point suplexes Chris Jericho onto the concrete. Jericho applies the Walls of Jericho, but Austin fights his way to the ropes. Jericho then misses a flying forearm and sends Hebner out the ring. So the referee's down, and this is when the crowd immediately starts a big Triple H chant.
I wonder, because why would you Why would they possibly think Triple H is going to be here, Callum?
It might be because he's basically on all the promotional material leading into Vengeance
He's on
2001.
all of the promotional material. He's on the poster. The match graphic, everything that happens on the show is a sledgehammer banging in the words vengeance.
So Triple H, as far as I'm aware, was healthy and fit enough to compete on this show, if he'd have chosen to. But they decided to keep him off to build up towards the Royal Rumble instead.
I think he said he was about 75%.
Triple
And
H
then
would have
they
worked.
said,
Triple H would have worked at 75%.
but then they were like he was still training in Birmingham, and then they suddenly hit him with the, all right, so we want you to run in at the end of Vengeance. And he's like, no, I'm not ready. And that was pretty much it.
No, and obviously things would work out well for Triple H by coming back in early January, getting that huge pop, returning as babyface, winning the Royal Rumble, winning the title at WrestleMania. It's pretty much the typical Triple H story.
Even though that's probably his only, or one of his only major wins as a face.
Yeah, probably is. Definitely at WrestleMania, yeah. I think that's the only time he wins the World Championship as a face at WrestleMania. So Jericho at one point low blows Austin with the referee down, hits a stunner. Vince brings Nick Patrick out to the ring to be like the crooked referee in his corner, but Ric Flair comes out to stop him. Now we're getting into the overbooked territory of this stuff again.
Wait, and we haven't even gotten to the main guy that costs him everything.
Oh yeah, we haven't even gotten to that point yet because Ric Flair comes out, punches out Nick Patrick, then Vince punches out Ric Flair and sends him into the ring post. Austin then low blows Jericho and attacks Vince on the floor, so all this stuff is going on. Austin applies his own walls to Jericho, and Jericho taps out pretty immediately with all the referees down and all the other people down. And then eventually Booker T, who Austin would soon have his big famous supermarket brawl with, gets in the ring with the WWF Championship and hits Austin like in the back of the head. Lawler and JR made it quite clear at this point in time that Booker wasn't employed by WWF because as an ongoing storyline following Survivor Series, a lot of WCW people weren't actually appearing on TV for a while. I think they did this on-running story for a couple of weeks of Lance Storm having to constantly have matches to try and win a contract.
That's kind of nice. I like that continuity.
Yeah. But Booker would get rehired off the back of this because he helps Austin lose and Vince wanted Austin to lose. Jericho hooks the leg and Hebner counts down for the 3 and Jericho wins the Undisputed Championship. So at this point, it wouldn't be its own separate belt. They wouldn't get that until Triple H won it, but it would just be him holding both the WWF and the World Heavyweight Championship simultaneously.
I always like that.
It's a pretty good looking thing. I think Jericho pulled it off pretty well because of the stance that he takes, where he's got that legs wide apart, tight on both shoulders,
and the entrance too, and the whole one belt on one side, one belt on the other. I used to love that.
Yeah, I don't think other wrestlers would have pulled it off as well as Jericho did.
And Triple H as well, because Triple H has the whole, pose, which looks great with 2 belts. And then I can't really see Hogan bothering to carry around 2 belts.
No. I don't know if his back could take it at that point.
I think when they had done this in the recent history with the WWE World Title, when Lesnar wins it, the first thing he says to TMZ is, "Do you really think I'm going to lug around 2 belts?" I don't think so. I could see Hulk Hogan being very much in that vein.
So it was another typically 2001 overbooked main event. But Jericho celebrates with both belts. Vince, confetti falls down, fireworks go off. It's quite interesting especially in these weird situations where Jericho on TV is celebrating with Vince, who's the guy who essentially booked him to win that championship.
That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah.
You get to have that moment of hey, thank you for trusting me with your company.
I guess a lot of people that were either watching at the time or can remember it from this point in time, this isn't exactly the most inspiring or successful run of Jericho's career.
He wouldn't get that until August of 2019.
No, I would fair say now that Jericho's current run as a world champion is going much, much better than his run as the first ever Undisputed Championship champion was. But obviously, this is the thing that he hung his hat on for many years afterwards. He's the guy that beat The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin on the same night, even if he needed basically the entire heel roster to help him do it. But yeah, that's the end of Vengeance 2001. I feel it's a very forgettable show, despite the significant thing that happens at the end of it. Just none of the matches really stand out. The only ones that really do anything for me are the Undertaker RVD match and the Jericho Rock match. Other than that, it's just pretty standard. It ranges from bad to average.
I think going into 2002, which I have said is maybe my favorite year overall. It's truly the year that stands out as forming my fandom. You at least had guys who were in the prime of their careers. Granted, you would have Taker and Jericho and Hunter later on down the line with guys like Shawn and Edge, but right now you have the top 4 guys in the industry, I would say, at their peak. You got Hunter, Austin, Rock, Taker, all going into Mania 18 as they're in their peak. But you had to get through this speed bump that was Vengeance to get to a pretty good Royal Rumble and Road to WrestleMania.
So that's pretty much an end to it then. That's the end of our final show we're reviewing for 2001 Wrestling Odyssey. And it's been an interesting look back to a very significant year in wrestling history.
Let's tell the truth here. It's been, as far as news and events, it's been all downhill since April.
Yeah, I think it became pretty evident, towards the midpoint, that how much of a downturn, WrestleMania 17, how much a turning point WrestleMania 17 was in all of the really wrong ways for WWF. The invasion angle was a huge missed opportunity. Austin turning heel had a really negative effect on business. Triple H getting injured cost them one of their top stars, and they didn't have the same sort of star power to carry them over the line. It was just it's a poor year overall. It's a very significant year, and there were some great moments. WrestleMania 17 is still one of, if not the greatest WrestleMania of all time.
It's a sad year too. Wrestling goes from being this bountiful, competitive place to being this one horse race that everybody's trying to get to the big dance, and even if you do, you're likely gonna be in the middle of the card because, as I just said, you have the top of the industry still in their prime.
And we also see 2001 sees the start of a lot of startup wrestling promotions trying to capitalize on the void left by WCW and ECW. And so we have the XWF and World Wrestling All Stars and other promotions like that, and none of them take off, but they form foundations for which we in 2002 would see the emergence of Ring of Honor and TNA.
Yeah, and then TNA and Ring of Honor would be nice backdrops to WWE's monopoly for the next near 2 decades.
Yeah, I'm almost surprised that I'm definitely surprised that TNA is still existing in some form or fashion at this point in time, and honestly, after this year, it's pretty surprising that Ring of Honor are still functioning as a company as well.
Ring of Honor, after this past year, has almost overtaken TNA Wrestling or Impact Wrestling as, all right, when's that gonna go?
Yeah.
This was not, as good as this was a year for wrestling, for the 2 stalwarts that have kind of held up the other guys, this was not a good year for TNA and Ring of Honor, and I think maybe one day when well, not us, but when somebody's doing 2019 year in review, you're going to hear a lot about how this was the year things fell apart for companies like ROH.
So I don't think there's like any too much point to go through like an awards based thing. 'Cause we've already done like spent hours and hours going over 2019 awards. But if there's like, are there any particular people or moments that kind of stand out of you over this year long journey?
I don't think you'll argue. Show of the year, WrestleMania.
Oh, obviously, yeah.
Superstar of the year, Steve Austin.
I thought Steve was like great this year, and I feel like there's very few that kind of live up to like the effort that he put in all year round.
And match of the year, I'm gonna give it to TLC too. But
It's definitely high out there for that one. I'd probably go. I'm trying to think. I'd probably lean to more like a Rock and Austin at
WrestleMania.
WrestleMania 17, or I'm trying to think if there's any other ones that like particularly stand out. Like even the TLC match from SmackDown.
Yeah, I tried to go through a top 10 in my head, and they all really feature either Rock, Austin, Benoit, or Jericho. And I figured, TLC 3 was the one that doesn't feature any of those, and it has probably the best. It was a car crash that needed to be a car crash. But I would say, Rock and Austin from 17 was great this year. The Benoit Jericho Austin Triple H match,
Oh yeah.
fantastic.
I'd also remember one Austin versus Triple H free stage of the Hell from No Way Out.
Absolutely. Benoit and Jericho in the ladder match.
Hmm. They're all pretty much contained pretty early in the year. Actually, a lot of these ones.
I'm telling you guys, 2001 in terms of an in-ring product, it goes after April, just takes a complete nosedive.
No, it's kind of only really propped up by the matches between
Jericho
and Rock and Angle and Austin, really.
I would agree. I would agree 100%.
But yeah, I think in terms of like some unsung heroes from 2001, which don't really get talked about a lot, I developed a newfound love and respect for Rhino during these months. I thought Rhino could have been something a lot more special than he ended up being, and just like listening to like watching some of his hardcore matches and stuff like that, I think he was a lot better than a lot of people give him credit for.
In that same vein, Guilty as Charged, the worst show of the year.
It's either Guilty as Charged, Women of Wrestling Unleashed, or that World Wrestling All Star show.
You know what? I'll give it to the World Wrestling All Stars for the homophobic slurs throughout the show.
I mean, sentimentally, I probably would give it to Guilty as Charged just because that was the end of ECW. Like that's their final big show, and that's how they ended it. I mean, all of them were terrible shows, but it's as other like unsung heroes. Like William Regal had a great year in 2001.
Absolutely. Tajiri had a fun year.
Oh, Tajiri was so much fun. Like RVD coming out like as the new top guy in a new top guy in WWF was great.
Would you argue it was his breakout year?
I think his breakout year was probably like 97, 98 ECW. I think everybody at that point, everyone knew who RVD was, and that was his big deal. Obviously, it's a breakout. It's his debut year in WWF, but it didn't really take him anywhere because he would just be pretty much supplied in the mid card for most of the rest of his career. So I can't say it was that much of a breakout.
But shout out to train wrecks like, I Want a Divorce, Vince and Linda, Genetic Jackhammer. We had a lot of just really overly sexual moments this year.
Oh, I remember what my match of the year for 2001 was. It's Kurt Angle versus Shane McMahon in the street fight.
A fantastic wrestling match.
Yeah,
The man almost dies, but fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I never want to see that type of match ever happen again, but it was a lot. It deserves it for what it delivered. We didn't actually we don't see much of Shane anyway beyond the Alliance stuff. Anyway, he doesn't come back doesn't come back as a prominent TV character for a while.
Half, I think.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a few other like names as well. Like I think for their level of consistency, the Dudley Boys had a great 2001. Always like pretty consistently in the tag team like championship scene. Got people like Raven as hardcore champion was a lot of fun.
Edge had a decent.
This was Edge kind of him being established as a single star. Christian as well, like had to be like a pretty big deal as well to do that, to carry that end of it as well.
I'll end it on this one very interesting parallel between 2001 and 2019. 2001 was the last year, up until this year, that no WWE or WWF pay-per-view would feature John Cena.
That is something to be said about all of these ones. So, yeah.
So, John Cena did not have a single match on any show this year, and he did not have a single match on any show in 01. He was at least on one pay-per-view in the ring from June of 02 to last year, and here we are again. These parallels, man.
Yeah, it is pretty funny how all this stuff has come together. But yeah, now we embark on a new era of wrestling where WWE is still the biggest dog in the yard, but there is a newcomer that's come in, and how successful they end up proving to be, well, I guess only time will tell. But at least, well,
At
with
least we
2001,
have an alternative.
with 2001, we've shown how badly things can go when there is only just one guy, one company in charge of everything. Like, as bad as ECW and WCW were at the time of their demise, I'm pretty sure most wrestling fans wish they were still around at this point and still going strong. Year's over. Our year now is pretty much over. So I'd like to thank everybody who has stuck around with this, tuned in, listened, left your thoughts below in the comment section, and enjoyed our little, like, pretty in-depth look back of the past year, or the year that was 2001.
The year that was 2001.
Yeah, it's hard. It feels like it was part of me now. It feels like I've lived that year.
Yeah, I'm a little worried that you're looking forward to the clock turning to 2002.
I mean, actually, that'd be quite fun because I'd be like 18 years younger.
You'd be like a
had
kid again.
my whole life in front of me. That sort of thing. Instead, I'm looking forward to 2020, where
and I want to just remind you, if anyone is a time traveler and listening to this in 2001, invest in Apple. That will do you some good.
Yeah, that'd be good. And use that money to purchase a new wrestling company.
Yeah,
and make sure our next few years are a bit more competitive than what it ended up being. But yeah, that's pretty much all we got for. So just time for a few plugs here. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to Smack Talk YouTube channel, Smark Out Moment. Check out the Smark Out Moment website. Check out all the articles on there. You can follow us if you're not following us on YouTube, you can follow us on all the other podcasting networks like iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, all this other great stuff. You've got leave the comments below. Just let us know what you thought about it. Click the like button, click the notification bell, follow all that great stuff because there's a lot more great content coming your way soon. If you'd like us to produce any more extra content like this, because 2001 has just been an additional piece of content alongside the other weekly stuff we've been providing all throughout the year and even further past that. Where if you want to donate to the Patreon, that would be very, very helpful. There's a Pick Your Poison tier at $50 level, where you can just basically request us to do anything you want. So if you're so desperate for us to continue into 2002 and do a monthly show on that, then $50 is all it's going to take. But there's obviously, even if you can just spare $1 or any amount of money, that's all goes greatly appreciated. Tony in particular will definitely very much thank you for that. There's also ways you can give us your money, essentially. Give us your money. That's but you can get something in return in terms of the Redbubble and TeePublic shops. So buy a bit of Smark Out Moment merchandise. Rob, do you want to throw your bits and pieces out there?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DudeFleece. You can check out everything I'm doing at Fightful and WrestleZone. Always remember to, if you can, donate to the Patreons for Smark Out Moment and Fanboys Anonymous, which is Tony's geek culture side of things. We're very grateful for those of you that have come on this journey with us. It's just been a great time, I think. I've enjoyed, and I'm very thankful to Callum for putting in the work and taking us all on this journey. And I will miss it, although, I will say I'm looking forward to maybe some new projects we have coming.
Yeah, all in due time if we do come up with some new things. At this point in time, the latest chapter in the Smack Talk journey is closed. So that's the end of 2001 A Wrestling Odyssey. If you want to follow any more of my musings and stuff like that, you can follow me on Twitter at Weekmeister14. For now, that's it, everybody. So thank you once again for joining us. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and we are being counted out.